Hello and welcome to my YouTube. This YouTube is remembering the year 1976. I was 32 years old, living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., and my office was 3 blocks from the White House. I was a senior project executive with Control Data Corporation. And our clients I consulted with included the White House, the U.S. Senate, and the House of Representatives, the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Defense, and FEMA. Having served as a nuclear reactor officer in the Navy, I already had the top secret security clearance that was necessary for my job. Control Data had just released the Star 100 computer, which was listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as, quote, the world's fastest and most powerful supercomputer. So of the 9 major computer companies in the world, at that moment, we had the most powerful computer on the market. So what was going on in 1976? On February 4th, a 7.5 magnitude earthquake hits Guatemala and Honduras, leaving 23,000 dead and 76,000 injured. 23,000 dead in Central America would be the same as 477,000 dead in America. That's like killing every single person in Denver, Colorado. This was a huge, devastating earthquake in Central America. On February 12th, the well-known actor Sal Mineo, known for his role in the film Rebel Without a Cause, is fatally stabbed in the alley behind his apartment building in West Hollywood at the age of 37. On March 9th, 2 coal mines explosions in Kentucky killed 26 miners. On March 20th, Patty Hearst is found guilty of armed robbery of a San Francisco bank in 1974. This was a huge story for several years in the American news press. Patty Hearst was a daughter of a billionaire, William Randolph Hearst. And this radical group of people called the Symbionese Liberation Army kidnapped her, and they held her hostage. And they demanded that the government release 2 of their members that were being held for murder. Well, the government refused to do that. So Patty Hearst was tortured and raped and brainwashed and pumped full of drugs, and eventually actually fell in love with one of the Symbionese Liberation Army guys that was holding her, and willingly participated in a bank robbery. And she was captured and found guilty of armed robbery. On March 31st, the New Jersey Supreme Court rules that a patient in a persistent vegetative state in the Karen Ann Quinlan case can be disconnected from her ventilator. Karen remained comatose and died 9 years later in 1985. This was a huge, sad story all over America. Everybody knew about this. On April 1st, 2 guys by the name of Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak formed a new company, and they called it Apple Computer. And I ended up working for Apple for over 30 years. In fact, I hired a woman and brought her into Apple. She transferred out to Cupertino, met and fell in love and married Steve Wozniak. On April 1st, Conrail was established. There were these railroads that were going bankrupt, and so the government took them over. On May 21st, the Yuba City school bus disaster, which was the second worst bus crash in U.S. history, and it leaves 28 student choir members and one teacher dead. This school bus was coming around this corner and it flipped over and fell 30 feet on its roof, and it killed 28 students and a teacher. On May 24th in Washington, D.C., the Concorde begins service. This was the fastest passenger plane in the world. It could cross the ocean, I think, in a couple of hours. It was a big deal because I was living in the suburbs and we all knew that the Concorde, people would go out to the airport just to watch this plane land and take off. Let me tell you a little personal story. I went to the airport to take my wife, who was going to go visit her parents back in Illinois. And there was an observation deck, and it looked like this. And I was standing on the observation deck, and my wife's plane was right below me. They didn't have a concourse. They had to roll the stairs up to the plane. And so all of the passengers walked up these stairs into the airplane. Well, as I'm sitting there watching all of this, the Concorde is about to take off. So after all the passengers are off, I'm watching, and suddenly the pilot and co-pilot come out of the plane and come down the stairs, and they walk around to the other side. They want to watch the Concorde take off. Let me tell you, it was the loudest jet I have ever heard, and I served 5 years on an aircraft carrier. But the sound of the Concorde. So anyway, the two pilots from this Ozark airline plane, they're standing out here watching the Concorde. What they didn't know is the ground crew came and they closed the door and they wheeled away the stairs. So the pilot and co-pilots are now locked out of their plane with no way to get on the plane. When the Concorde took off, they came back and realized what had happened, and it took about 5 minutes to get the stairs back, and the pilot and co-pilot ran up there and opened the door and hopped in and took off as fast as they can. But I'll never forget the two pilots getting locked out of their own airplane. On June 5th, the Teton Dam collapses in southeast Idaho, and 11 people were killed. On July 3rd, in the case Gregg versus Georgia, the Supreme Court of the United States rules that the death penalty is not inherently cruel or unusual and is a constitutionally accepted form of punishment. Big case. It's 1976, so on July 4th, the country celebrates its Bicentennial 200th anniversary of the 1976 adoption of the Declaration of Independence. And there were parades and celebrations in every city and town and village across America. It was a really big deal. On July 6th, the first class of women is inducted at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. Congratulations, girls. On July 12th, at Cal State University in Fullerton, there was a massacre. 7 people are shot and killed, and 2 others are wounded in a mass shooting on campus. On July 15th, Jimmy Carter is nominated for U.S. President at the Democratic National Convention in New York City. This was an amazing story. On July 15th, 26 chinchilla That's a little town in California. 26 school children and their bus driver are abducted and buried in a box truck within a quarry in Livermore, California. So they kidnap these kids and their bus driver. They haul them almost 100 miles north, and they put them in this bus, and they used bulldozers, and they buried them underground. Well, the captives dig themselves free after 16 hours, and the quarry owner's son and 2 accomplices are arrested for the crime. Unbelievable. Buried underground, and they managed to dig their way out and survive. On July 18th, 14-year-old Romanian gymnast Nadia Comaneci earns the first of 7 perfect scores of 10 at the 1976 Summer Olympics. Everybody knew her name, Nadia Comaneci. Nadia Comaneci. She was the darling of the world. Turns out she had a pretty good coach. His name was Coach Bella Caroli. And a few years later, Coach Caroli and his wife immigrated to the United States and began coaching Americans. And 8 years later, this young lady, Mary Lou Retton, won the Olympic gold medal for all around. So yeah, he was a really good coach. On July 20th, the Viking 1 lander successfully lands on Mars, and it started taking these amazing pictures of the Martian surface. There were some funny cartoons that came out. Let me show you a couple of them. Here we see a Martian holding up a picture of a dry desert in front of the Viking 1. Here's one I remember. Same idea. Here are these Martians, and they live in this very modern city. They have all kinds of things, and they see this little robot, and so they put these pictures all around him to fool him into thinking that there's nothing on the surface of Mars. It's just a dry desert. On July 27th, Legionnaire's disease strikes at the American Legion Convention in Philadelphia. They were having a convention at the Bellevue Stratford Hotel, and 149 men mysteriously started getting sick, and they had no idea what was wrong with them, and 29 of them ended up dying. It was eventually discovered what it was, and it carries the name Legionnaire's disease because it started at this American Legion convention in Philadelphia. On July 28th, the Tangshan earthquake flattens Tangshan, China, killing 242,769 people and injuring another 164,851. Can you imagine an earthquake killing 242,000 people? On July 29th in New York City, the son of Sam pulls a gun from a paper bag, killing one and seriously wounding another, in the first of a series of attacks that terrorized the city for the next year. And he left notes. I say goodbye and good night. Police, let me haunt you with these words. I'll be back. I'll be back. To be interpreted as bang, 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 bang. Ugh! Yours in murder, Mr. Monster. So he started sending these notes to the police. He was eventually caught. Oh, by the way, he ended up killing 6 people and wounding another 7. New York City was afraid to go out. And this is the guy they finally caught, David Berkowitz. By the way, what did this son of Sam? Well, it turns out he claimed that a demon talked to him and told him to kill these people. A black demon. That black demon was the neighbor's black dog, and that dog name was Sam. Hence, son of Sam, the demon. On July 31st, NASA releases the famous Face on Mars photo taken by Viking 1. And you can imagine all of the rumors that started swelling and ideas about, well, is this real? Did the Martians build this? What is this thing? On July 31st, the Big Thompson River in northern Colorado floods, destroying more than 400 houses and killing 143 people. On August 18th, at Panmunjom, North Korea, 2 United States soldiers are killed while trying to chop down part of a tree in the Korean demilitarized zone, which had obscured their view. So they're out here up in this tree, and the North Koreans come out and kill them. On August 19th, U.S. President Gerald Ford edges out challenger Ronald Reagan to win the Republican Party's presidential nomination in Kansas City. On August 26th, the first known outbreak of Ebola virus occurs in Yambuku, Zaire. This was a very, very deadly virus. On September 9th, chairman of the Chinese Communist Party, Mao Zedong, dies in Beijing after a series of heart attacks. On September 24th, Patty Hearst is sentenced to 7 years in prison for her role in the armed robbery of a San Francisco bank in 1974. This was really a sad, sad story. So it would kind of be like kidnapping Donald Trump's daughter. Patty Hearst was 19 years old, a college student. She was very bright. She had an IQ of 130. And when they finally captured her, she had been pumped full of so many drugs for so long that she weighed less than 80 pounds. And she was like a zombie. And they said even during her court trial, she hardly reacted at all. Anyway, she was sentenced to 7 years in prison. President Carter commuted her sentence after 22 months in prison. My daughter Allison was born, and I called her my Bicentennial baby because she was born in Washington, D.C. On October 20th, the Mississippi River ferry M.V. George Prince is struck by a ship while crossing the Mississippi, killing 78 passengers and crew. On November 2nd, 1976, United States presidential election, and Jimmy Carter narrowly defeats incumbent Gerald Ford, becoming the first candidate from the Deep South to win since the Civil War. Little personal story. So Jimmy Carter comes to Washington, and my office was just 3 blocks away from the White House. He had a daughter, Amy, who was an elementary school student, and Amy attended this elementary school, Stevens Elementary School in downtown Washington, D.C. And the reason I'm pointing it out is because this building right here was my office building. And let me give you another view of this. So here's Amy's school, and right across the street is my office building, and this is my office. So I had a perfect view of the front of this school. Every morning, two big black SUVs pulled up, three SUVs pulled up to this school. And Amy Carter and 4 or 5 agents, both men and women, got out of the car with her and walked her into the school. And 2 or 3 of the agents would stay inside the school. One of the black SUVs parked here in front, and the other SUV parked over here on the side. And those 2 SUVs sat there all day long with 8 Secret Service agents inside them to protect Amy Carter. And I watched this every morning. On November 26th, Microsoft is officially registered with the Office of the Secretary of State of New Mexico. And Paul Allen and a very young 23-year-old kid by the name of Bill Gates formed this company called Microsoft. You might have heard of it. On December 6th, the Viet Cong and its former members become a part of the Vietnam People's Army. What was introduced in 1976? Well, the very first laser printer is introduced by IBM. It was called the IBM 3800. It cost $175,000 in 1976. In today's dollars, that would be $9,600,000 for this giant, monstrous laser printer. By the way, today I can buy a laser printer that sits on my desk for only $150, $200, $250. Okay, we've come a long way, baby. Gore-Tex was invented. This was an amazing waterproof material. It kept out the cold and the rain, but if you sweated, your sweat vapors would pass through. But the rain was blocked. Gore-Tex. So people started making lots of things, clothes and shoes, out of Gore-Tex. The VH tape was introduced in Japan. Whack-a-mole was introduced. This is a fun game. So you had this paddle, and these little moles would pop up randomly. You never knew where they were going to beat, where they pop up. And what you had to do is you had to smack them before they popped back down in the hole. And if you hit them, you got points. Whack-a-mole. I've probably played it a dozen times in my life. It was a lot of fun. The TI-30 calculator. This really was a big deal. You see, it only cost about $25. It was a scientific calculator. It could do trig functions, and at the time, calculators cost anywhere from $100 to $500. So this was really, really startling. Finally, the average person could afford a handheld calculator. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak introduced the Apple I computer. And you're looking at it. Now, let me explain a few things to you about this. They sold it for $500. In today's dollars, that would be about $2,700. So I know what you're thinking. Okay, you have a monitor and a keyboard and a tape drive, and this must be the computer. No, that's not what you got for $500. You didn't get a monitor. you had to figure out what to hook it up to. Most people hooked it up to their television because Wozniak did put a connector on here that allowed people to go out to a TV. And by the way, you didn't get that keyboard. You had to go out and find a keyboard. And let me tell you, in 1976, there were no computer stores around the corner anywhere. So that was a task. It had no storage except for a tape drive, but nope, the tape drive was not included. So if you wanted to load a program or store a program, you had to go out and buy a cassette tape drive. So for $500, all you got was this bare motherboard logic. That's the Apple I computer. And amazingly, as crude as that is, it had 4K of RAM. The Apple Watch on my wrist right now has 1,240K of RAM. By the way, an Apple I computer sold for $700,000 in the mid-1970s. They became a real collector's piece. The Wonder Wizard. This was basically the Pong game. It had 3 different games, but they all basically were Pong. You use these little knobs to control this white paddle up and down, and this little ball bounced back and forth, and 2 of you could play, and you hooked it up to your family television. Who was born in 1976? I think you'll recognize these people. Reese Witherspoon, well-known fine actress. Peyton Manning, football quarterback with the Colts and the Broncos, all-star, Hall of Famer. The well-known actor Colin Farrell. The country western singer Blake Shelton. Now, a lot of you will recognize him because he is one of the hosts of the TV show The Voice. Born in 1976. The very fine actor Benedict Cumberbatch. What was the average salary in 1976? Average annual salary. It was a whopping $8,345. Now that's 1976 dollars. If I convert that to today's dollars, that would be $46,120. So how does that really stack up? Is that good or bad? It's not very good because I just looked this up, and the average salary in America right now is $65,470. So a $46,000 salary would be subpar compared to what people make today. What did a gallon of gas cost? Cost a whopping 56 cents. What if I converted that to today's dollars? That would be $3.10 a gallon in today's dollars. And once again, that's not very good because I just looked this up a moment ago, and I am paying $2.87 a gallon when I go gas up at Costco. What was the price of a new car in 1976? Average price. And it was $5,450. Let's convert that into today's dollars. That would be a $30,121 car in today's dollars. And it turns out the average car cost in America right now is $30,000. What were the most popular TV shows of 1976? Number 1, Happy Days with the Fonz. Number 2, Laverne and Shirley. Number 3, ABC Monday Night Movie. Number 4, MASH. This was popular for years. And coming in at number 5, Charlie's Angels. And by the way, we never ever saw Charlie. We just heard his voice on the telephone. What were the top grossing movies of 1976? And that means what made the most money? What were the biggest money makers? Starting at number 1, the biggest money maker was Rocky, the original. And remember his opponent? Apollo Creed. It was nominated for Best Picture, but it didn't win. Number 2, biggest money maker. Quite frankly, I have no memory of this movie. To Fly. It was basically a documentary about man's flight. And it premiered at the Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. on the big IMAX screen. So a documentary was the second biggest moneymaker in 1976. Number 3, A Star is Born, starring Streisand and Chris Christopherson. This has been remade 2 or 3 times now. The latest one had Lady Gaga playing Barbra Streisand's role. Next, King Kong, starring Jeff Bridges and introducing a new young actress by the name of Jessica Lange. I've lost track of how many King Kong movies there have been over the last 75, 80 years. Probably half a dozen at least. Next, Silver Streak, a comedy starring Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. There's a pair. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest won the Academy Awards for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay. Won 5 Academy Awards. Jack Nicholson played this mental institution patient. And we all came to know this name. Lois Fletcher was a very fine actress, and she played the infamous Nurse Ratched. I read that she passed away 2 years ago at the age of 88. Nurse Ratched. I don't know how many times I've jokingly referred to myself as Nurse Ratched when I had to take care of my wife during her knee replacements or her hip replacements. I was the infamous Nurse Ratched. Who were the top singers of 1976? Number 1, Stevie Wonder. This is based upon radio plays, record sales, jukebox plays. There's companies that calculate this. So Stevie Wonder came in number 1. Number 2, ABBA, one of my favorite groups. In fact, I recorded their song and put it on YouTube, the song SOS. Number 3, Rod Stewart, Maggie May. Number 4, Paul McCartney. And number 5, KC and the Sunshine Band. What were the top songs of 1976? Number 1, Silly Love Songs by Wings. Number 2, Don't Go Breaking My Heart by Elton John and Kiki D. Number 3, Johnny Taylor's Disco Lady. Number 4, The Four Seasons December 1963. Oh, what a night. And number 5, the Wild Cherry Group, Play That Funky Music.